This land here, these 1,000 hectares, all of this is worth millions. The notary's voice echoed through the crowded hall, but it was Marcos, Carla, and Diego lined up in front, who were left breathless, not knowing where to hide their faces. In front of them, with their spines straight as they hadn't been in a long time, So Antonio and Donna Rosa exchanged silent glances. These were the same people who, weeks before, had been evicted from their own children's home with a suitcase in hand and a "we can't stand supporting you anymore" thrown in their faces. Now, in front of the entire city, they were discovering that the parents they treated like a burden were the sole heirs to an old farm, valued at a fortune none of them had ever seen, not even in a bank statement. The silence was only broken when the notary concluded, and by express wish in the will, these assets, no, they will not be passed on to any heir who has abandoned or humiliated the owners. A murmur cut through the air, people staring at each other, hands rising to their mouths in shock. Marcos took a step forward, red with shame and panic, trying to say something to erase what he had done. But his father, Antonio, raised his hand and with the calm of someone who has already cried all he had to cry, said, "The only thing you inherit today is the shame of what you did." And that afternoon, under the golden sun shining through the window, it became clear that it wasn't the parents who had lost their children. It was the children who had lost the most valuable inheritance, the right to call those two father and mother. Before we delve into this amazing story, tell me which city and state you're watching from. Leave a comment and I'll reply with gratitude. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. In the small town in the countryside, everyone knew that So Antonio and Donna Rosa had always been hardworking people. Their entire lives had been spent on the land, planting, harvesting, raising cattle, milking cows, repairing broken fences, facing droughts and floods. When they got older and their health began to take its toll, their children told them it would be better to sell that old farm and move to the city to live near them, where they could help. But at that time, nobody really wanted to understand what that land meant. For the children, it was just a piece of land that didn't yield as much as they would like. For the couple, it was the story of a lifetime. Even so, pressured by endless conversations, they ended up agreeing to sell a small part of the farm to a neighbor and with the money buy a modest little house on the outskirts of town, registered in the name of their eldest son, Marcos. Because it's easier for the bank, Dad, trust me. The rest of the land remained untouched, the documentation stored in a worn folder deep inside a cupboard, as if it were a chapter they didn't have the courage to close. Over time, the children's visits turned into demands. At first, it was all in jest. "Mom, you use too much electricity. You have to turn off the lights more often. Dad, that medicine is expensive. You have to take care of yourself so you don't cause trouble." Later, they became direct complaints. "I'm tired of having to pay your bills. If it weren't for you, my life would be much easier." Donna Rosa listened silently, her apron tied around her waist, her wrinkled hands still smelling of garlic and coffee. So Antonio pretended not to be bothered, but at night he stared at the ceiling, sleepless, mentally repeating whether he had done something so wrong in raising them. When the pension was a few days late, the comments came like stabs. "You didn't think about old age. Now you want everything to fall on our shoulders?" What hurt wasn't the difficulty, it was the tone. It wasn't the bill, it was the contempt embedded in each sentence. One Sunday, the house, once filled with the smell of macaroni and grandchildren running around, transformed into a judgment square. Marcos arrived irritated, throwing his keys on the table. Carla came with a folder of papers in her hand, saying she needed to have a serious conversation. Diego, the youngest, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, in the comfortable posture of someone who wasn't going to decide anything, but enjoyed watching. Donna Rosa noticed the seriousness on their faces, clutching the dish towel between her fingers, already feeling her stomach churn. "Dad, Mum, this can't go on anymore," Carla began, looking anywhere but at them. "I pay for medicine, I pay for electricity, I pay for water, I help with groceries, and Marcos does too. We have our children, our bills, our lives." Before Donna Rosa could say they never asked for anything, Marcos added, his voice heavy with weariness and impatience. "You're always complaining that the pension is too small, but you don't do anything to improve it. It seems like you're waiting for us to solve everything. I'm not a bank, Dad." So Antonio swallowed hard. It was the first time he had heard it so clearly. He tried to argue that they had always worked, that they had never let them go hungry, that they had sold part of the farm precisely so as not to cause trouble. But the words died in his throat, overwhelmed by complaints. "We don't want to be cruel," said Carla, in one of those speeches that always precede cruelty. "But maybe it would be better if you went to live with Aunt Lourdes, on her farm, or rented a small room somewhere else. This house is a burden for us, Dad. Everything is in your name, Marcos, but we're the ones who hold things together." The phrase, "this house is a burden," hit him like a stone. It was as if they, the parents, were a piece of furniture that took up too much space. Donna Rosa, her eyes already welling up with tears, dared to ask, "Are you wanting us to leave?" Diego, who had remained silent until then, decided to speak up. "It's not wanting, Mom. It's needing. You've lived your lives. Now it's ours. You have to understand that you can't be eternally dependent on your children." That pierced Su Antonio like barbed wire. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence hurt more than any scream. Carla placed the folder of documents on the table and explained that she had already spoken with a real estate agent, that the house could be sold, that they could rent a cheap little room near the bus station, in a place more suitable for your age. At no point did anyone ask what they wanted. The final scene of that Sunday was one of the cruelest that neighborhood had ever witnessed. So Antonio and Donna Rosa, each with a small suitcase, sat on the curb in front of the house they thought would be their safe haven in old age, while the neighbors peeked from behind the curtains. There was no real hug, no apology, no "don't do that." There was a quick kiss on the forehead, a "you'll understand later," and a door closing hastily. The feeling was that the whole world had shrunk to fit only in that piece of sidewalk, where two elderly people, who once gave everything they had, now wondered if they were really worth so little. What the children didn't know was that at that moment, they weren't just throwing their parents out of the house, they were pushing away the key to an inheritance that would change everyone's destiny. The first few days in the rented room near the bus station were a daily exercise in swallowing one's pride. The thin walls let through the noise of the neighbor's loud television, the smell of grease from the snack bar next door, and the arguments of the couple 2 rooms away. Donna Rosa organized the few folded clothes as if that would prevent her heart from becoming disorganized as well. Su Antonio tried to be practical, saying that it would be worse to be on the street, but at night, when he heard the buses arriving and departing, he thought of Sundays of pasta, of his grandchildren complaining about the heat on the porch, of conversations about rainy weather while looking at the sky in the countryside. Every now and then, he would pick up his old cell phone, run his finger over his children's names in the contact list, and stop before pressing call. He didn't want to hear a "I can't right now" said in a tone of obligation on the other end. One Monday afternoon, while Donna Rosa was trying to straighten a curtain that kept falling down, someone knocked on the door. It was Donna Nair, the neighbor from the old neighborhood, the one who used to lend sugar and listen to complaints by the gate. She carried a bag of fresh bread in one hand and in the other an old cardboard folder. "I found this in the trash near the house. It had your names written on it," she said, entering without ceremony. Upon seeing the folder, Donna Rosa felt her heart race. It was the same one she had kept for years, containing the documents for the part of the farm that had never been sold. The deed, old receipts, letters from So Antonio's father talking about the land, a somewhat yellowed will where the grandfather confirmed that it all belonged to them. In the midst of the chaos of the forced move, someone had thrown that folder along with the remains of old furniture. If it weren't for Donna Nair, the whole story would have gone away in a black bag. Sitting on the narrow bed, the two began to leaf through the papers. At first glance, it was just a pile of documents that were difficult to understand. But among them was a recent letter from a law firm in a larger city, which Donna Rosa didn't even remember receiving. The letter spoke of a company interested in leasing part of the land for the installation of wind turbines, offering a contract value that, to them, seemed like something out of a soap opera. Attached was a card with a phone number and email address, requesting an urgent reply. So Antonio read it once, twice, 3 times in disbelief. Those lands, left aside because he didn't have the strength to manage them, were now worth much more than anything his children had imagined. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was a fortune. The next day, his heart racing and his hand trembling, he went to the internet cafe on the corner where the cashier lent him the landline to make the call. On the other end, a lawyer with a firm voice almost sighed with relief when she heard his name. "Mr. Antonio, we've been trying to contact you for months. This land is strategic for the company. Do you know how much it's worth?" He didn't know. She explained numbers, spoke of millions, of 20-year contracts, of monthly income he had never seen even in his entire working life. She arranged a trip to the countryside, to the city where the responsible registry office was located, and asked him to bring all the documentation. When he hung up, he held the phone in his hand for a few seconds, as if clinging to a dream that could suddenly vanish. The trip to the farm town was like stepping back in time. The landscape of fields, fences, grazing cattle, the smell of damp earth after the rain. At every turn, Donna Rosa glimpsed a piece of her youth that had been left behind. When they arrived at the registry office, they were received with unusual respect for 2 elderly people in simple clothes. The lawyer awaited them with a stack of forms. They sat in a large room, and she calmly explained. The lands that Su Antonio's father had left were much larger than they had thought, and due to the expansion of energy projects and a possible environmental reserve area, the value had skyrocketed in recent years. Several companies were interested not only in leasing, but also in buying significant portions for dizzying sums. The couple looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It was as if the world were saying, "You were never a burden, you were always wealth." The lawyer, noticing their shock, suggested they start with a lease, guaranteeing a high and stable monthly income without giving up ownership. She also recommended they register everything directly in their names, without intermediaries, and warned them, if any relative shows up at the last minute claiming ownership, only what's on paper counts. It was then that Antonio made a silent decision. If any of his children wanted to return, it wouldn't be for the money, because if they came only for that, they wouldn't come back. With the first contract signed, life took an unexpected turn. The money that started pouring into their account seemed like a system error. The bank manager, who had previously barely looked at them, offered coffee, water, a comfortable chair, and even a black card. So Antonio refused any extravagance, asking only for guidance to avoid being cheated, and insisted on one thing: "I want to register a new will." He and Donna Rosa spent hours discussing who they would leave it all to. They remembered their grandchildren, of course, but also the words they had heard in the living room of the house that was no longer theirs. They decided that the inheritance could not be a reward for those who had treated them as a burden. They resolved to divide it into 3 parts, one for a city institution that cared for abandoned elderly people, another for a specific granddaughter, the one who always called to ask if they were okay, even when her parents rolled their eyes, and the third would remain in their usufruct for as long as they lived, with a clear clause. None of the children who had expelled them could lift a finger to demand anything. As they left the registry office, the sun was setting behind the line of eucalyptus trees, casting a strong golden light over the land they once thought they had lost. Donna Rosa squeezed her husband's arm and whispered, "Antonio, God saw everything." He simply nodded, his eyes welling up with tears, feeling that, in some mysterious way, life had decided to settle the score. What they didn't imagine was that in a few days, their children would discover the news of the inheritance in the most painful way possible, through others, and not through their parents. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Small towns don't keep secrets, and curious neighboring towns spread everything with gusto. When the headline on the local portal appeared with a photo of Antonio shaking hands with a businessman in front of the notary's office, talking about $1 million partnership in old lands in the region, the family's WhatsApp group exploded. Carla was the first to send the link to the siblings group. "Is this really what I'm seeing?" Marcos, upon clicking, felt a chill run down his spine. That man in the humble hat, smiling without exaggeration next to suited lawyers, was the same father he had sent to find a cheap little room near the bus station. Diego, who always preferred to stay away from responsibility, replied with a short audio message, his voice trembling. "Dude, is this a fake?" Hours of rapid conversation, crossed phone calls, and silent accusations followed. None of the three dared to send a direct message to their parents that day. The shame weighed too heavily. At the same time, calculations ran parallel in each of their minds. If this land is worth what the news says, we are the heirs. Moral conflict vied with ambition. In the end, as almost always happens when pride and money meet, money spoke louder. Marcos suggested they all go together to the city where the farm was located to talk calmly. Carla agreed, already imagining she could justify everything as the heat of the moment. Diego, afraid of being left out, went too. And when they arrived in the small town, they parked their imported car right in front of the registry office, unintentionally drawing attention. Inside, they were informed that their parents were at the city council meeting, where the partnership with the energy company would be formalized in a public session. "If you want, you can go there. The whole town was invited," said the clerk, with a smile that mixed admiration and curiosity. The three headed towards the old building, where a murmur could already be heard from outside. The hall was packed. Farmers, merchants, local authorities, curious onlookers. In the center, at a prominent table, so Antonio and Donna Rosa sat, more dressed up than their children remembered seeing them in recent years. She wore a simple but pretty dress, her hair neatly tied back. He wore a new shirt that seemed to make his shoulders look less slumped. Beside them, the lawyer and the company representative presented the details of the contract, projecting numbers onto an improvised screen. When the estimated value of the partnership appeared, a murmur ran through the hall. It was big money. The children stood at the door, too afraid to go inside. They watched the scene from afar, as if they didn't belong there. At one point, the president of the city council asked to speak and said, "This partnership is not just a contract. It is also a historical reparation. These lands were forgotten for years, and now they are being recognized again. And I would like, with respect, to congratulate Mr. Antonio and Mrs. Rosa for not giving up on their family inheritance." At that moment, as if an invisible thread pulled everyone's eyes, some of those present noticed the three standing at the door. Murmurs began. "They are their children. The ones who kicked them out of the house," I heard. Out in a small town, gossip arrives before the official news. The ceremony reached its climax when the notary was called upon to read the new will at the request of Mr. Antonio himself. He stood up, adjusted his glasses, opened his briefcase, and began to read aloud with all the formality in the world. He explained that the land had been inherited from Mr. Antonio's father, that it was now legally registered, that there was a signed lease agreement, and that, thinking of the future, the couple had decided to have everything documented. And then came the passage that cut through the air like a knife. It is hereby determined that no descendant who has abandoned, expelled, or humiliated the owners may claim a share in this inheritance. Reports that they were evicted from their residence and left without support will be attached, signed by witnesses. The murmur turned to open astonishment. People exchanged glances. Some shook their heads in disapproval. Others murmured a "serves them right." Marcos couldn't take it anymore. He entered the room, his face burning, and shouted, "This is absurd! You're turning the whole city against us!" The silence that followed was only broken by the slow steps of his father, Antonio, as he stood up. He turned, faced his three sons in front of everyone, and spoke with a calmness that hurt more than any shout. "I didn't need to turn anyone against you. You did this yourselves the day you left us on the sidewalk with a suitcase in our hands." Donna Rosa, beside him, struggled to hold back tears. The lawyer tried to intervene, but he gestured for her to be allowed to speak. Desperate, Carla tried to approach, tears already streaming down her face. "Mom, Dad, we were nervous that day. You know how hard it is. We thought it was for the best." Donna Rosa took a deep breath, as if searching for strength deep within her chest, and replied, "For the best for whom, my daughter? So you could be more relaxed? Because for us it was the worst day of our lives. You could have asked for help. You could have talked. But you preferred to say that we were a burden, that our old age was a hindrance." The people present began to lower their heads, ashamed of the situation, but no one left. The town wanted to hear it to the end. Diego, always the one who shirked responsibility, now had nowhere to run. "Dad, we made a mistake, okay? But you didn't need to do this to us. We're your children." That's when his father, Antonio, with tears in his eyes, uttered the phrase that would remain in everyone's memory. Being a child isn't just about being born to someone. It's about choosing to stay when things get tough. You chose to get rid of us, and now you'll have to live with that choice. He explained that a large part of the inheritance was earmarked for an institution that cared for abandoned elderly people, because nobody there sends anyone away because they use up medicine. Another part would go to his granddaughter Anna, Carla's daughter, the only one who, even as a child, secretly called them to say she missed them. "She never treated us like a burden," he justified. "She deserves a different future." The impact was devastating. Carla almost collapsed upon hearing that her own daughter would inherit what she, as an adult, had lost through greed and coldness. Marcos stumbled out of the hall, more out of shame than anger. Diego, unsure what to do, followed him. The entire town whispered, not with a taste for gossip this time, but with a mixture of lesson and warning. Look what happens when you treat your parents like a burden. Some elderly people present discreetly wiped away tears, perhaps thinking of their own children. At the end of the session, with the will read and the contract signed, the audience began to applaud. It wasn't applause for the money, it was for the courage. So Antonio embraced Donna Rosa, and in that gesture there was a silent certainty. They were finally in a place where they weren't considered a burden. Outside, the sun set over the lands that now had a guaranteed return in the form of income, but more than that, in the form of respect. As they were leaving, a small hand tugged at Donna Rosa's dress. It was Anna, her granddaughter, who had come secretly with an aunt. "Grandma, can I visit the farm with you someday?" Donna Rosa bent down, hugged the girl tightly, and replied, Yes, my love. These lands are now a little bit yours too, but not because of the money. It's because you never stopped loving us. Su Antonio smiled, gazing into the distance at the horizon, and thought that in the end, the true inheritance wasn't the farm, nor the contract, nor the amount printed in the newspapers. It was knowing that, despite everything, there was still a small heart there that hadn't sold itself for comfort. As the simple car they had just bought with their own money left the city, taking that couple, whom they had once heard say were too heavy, to the farm, the three children stayed behind, staring at the registry office building as if it were a giant mirror. It wasn't just a deed they had lost, it was the chance to have done things differently. And in this story, the message was clear. Whoever drives love out of the house, sooner or later, ends up seeing their inheritance leave through the same door.